Well, with the box office success of Black Adam and the reorienting of Discovery Warner Bros., now the DCEU has an opportunity to reform its brand and reintroduce itself to the world. We've been interested in this for a long time, but now we're starting to see some of the pieces of the puzzle come together. First, with this cutscene at the end of the credits of Black Adam, where Superman makes an appearance, and it's Henry Cavill, so he's back. He's interacting with Black Adam. We have a whole wealth of possibilities in terms of what can be done with the Justice Society, the Justice League, and we're starting to see some really interesting players get involved here. Let's just start with generally, what do you want to see from DC?
Well, if you're asking me, I know we sort of already spoiled it, but yeah, I mean, it's an open secret. It's not even a secret.
Not really.
Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman specifically, is back in Black Adam, and it's his first appearance, I believe. I know he was in 2021's Zack Snyder's Justice League,
Hmm.
but they were just using footage that was shot before. And the last time we truly had him on a project with DC as Superman was in 2017 in the theatrical version of the Justice League. So it's been like a good half decade now since we have seen Henry Cavill in the role. He always said the cape was in the closet, and I'll be honest with you, I think he has been the best on-screen portrayal of Superman ever. And I know a lot of people will point to Christopher Reeve as that example. I personally think his take, albeit very admirable and great for the time, doesn't quite age well with what we have today and what we expect a Superman character and the character depth and everything, the nuance with which you got to portray. Because here's the thing, it's very difficult to portray a practically immortal and in what would you call it, like invincible, perfect human being. There's no such thing. I mean, he's not a
He's
human,
well,
but like you
he's
know what
not
I
a
mean, like
human
a
being.
character. You
Yeah.
need certain character flaws. You need there's otherwise like there's no point of there's you can't make a movie or tell a story about somebody who's perfect in every which way. So I think to that if and I
Well,
think the
but
Henry Cavill
no.
portrayal is
See,
better.
I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push back there. You can and you should, and
Well,
it's
how?
really how. I'll tell
Yeah.
you how. Because we have we have no real role models these days. There's nobody out there, there's no character really that you can point to and say, I would do everything just like that if I could. And when you have all the powers and you are invincible and you're intelligent, that forces you to reflect on your abilities, use them for good, do the best you can, and it's not like Superman. It's not like Superman actually succeeds all the time. You know, everybody comes up against challenges, but this is what you do if you're all powerful, if you're all good. And really, who else can you point to today who is all good and who is all powerful? There's really nobody that we're seeing, and it would be a really cool thing. You could easily
But isn't it a little
critique Superman.
unrealistic though? I mean, even
Unreal Aren't
our
superheroes a little unrealistic?
well, I know, but what I see. But here's the thing: we're trying. If you're trying to make these movies grounded, right? Then like even like we all have role models in our lives, and we you and I have. I'm sure we have had models in our lives that we have looked up to, still do, but we know they're not perfect people. Like everybody, like they all have, some internal struggle
Sure.
that they are having to deal with and have dealt with their entire lives or now or in the past or and will do in the future. And that affects their decision making and how they go about living their life and the decisions they make. So I think it's to me it's only fair that you show a side of that to Superman because you can't show him as this this prophetically all good pure force. Now here's the thing, I do appreciate like a character like, for example, on the Jack Ryan character, especially John Krasinski's interpretation on Amazon Prime. He's that kind of a character, like a throwback almost, where he will always do the right thing and has that moral compass. And Chris Evans' Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe had that kind of a role as well. Like he always was like yeah, we have to find a better way to do this. There's a right way to do things, and that's how Civil War and the whole conflict of Civil War is kind of centered around Captain America saying, if I see a situation pointed south, I can't look the other way. And I think that's the version of Superman that Zack Snyder, and again, I'm defending, I guess, Zack Snyder's work here, but
Yeah.
through Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and Justice League, at least according to him, he said that he wanted to take Superman on a journey from being just living a life of every other human, or trying to do that for the majority of his, life up until he comes out to the world as the Superman. He had to then adjust from being like the expectation of the world of him was just as in Clark Kent to being as the Superman, which obviously means a lot
I
more than
really
just what Clark Kent means to the world.
I liked what Snyder did
Yeah.
with his upbringing a lot. And it's not that, because yeah, a kid who's going through this stuff is going to have those emotions, and he's going to have those experiences, and that was a wonderful way of grounding it. And I don't dislike Man of Steel. I just think there's some things I would have done differently. I really appreciate the attention to detail and the thought that went into crafting this version of the story and thinking out the details of some things that we probably glossed over in other versions of Superman. So I'm not going to tell you that I think Man of Steel was bad. I don't. I just want to see. Really, I just want to see Superman. I love Superman.
I mean, who
And
doesn't? I think it's like,
well, I
he's
think
the
a lot of people critique him as being like flat and uninteresting, and like it's boring to tell a story about somebody who's all powerful and perfect, and it's just like you raise the stakes and you make them relatable. But I think it'd be great to have some role model superheroes out there who are just doing the best they can and are demonstrating this is the best that can be done. I mean, that's part of it. I guess that's also what bugs me about the bumbling Atom Smasher. Like clearly he's gonna learn and he'll be better, and we're seeing a human side to him. But if you're gonna be a hero, and you're gonna take responsibility for your powers and for other people, you want to be able to trust them and you want to be able to look up to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I don't agree on your. I still think the critique of Adam Smasher. I enjoyed that interpretation in Black
And
Adam.
people will. They're
Um,
welcome to.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the journey that the Henry Cavill Superman and Clark can go on from the beginning of Man of Steel all the way to his last appearance in the Justice League, you kind of see him like basically he's got this like Jesus, I mean it's on purpose, it's like this Jesuit, is that would that be the word, kind of journey. Like there's a lot of imagery
Hmm.
of the like he goes up to the sun and like with his arms out and like this
Oh
cross
yeah,
shaped,
but
and
you know what? That's
he
in
dies and is
everything.
reborn, and they obviously lean into that. But from a character standpoint, um you go from this, like I said, I think this is the maybe the right way or the best way to look at the situation is Clark Kent had to adjust from being just Clark Kent to being the Superman, and the expectations that the world have of Clark Kent and of Superman are two very different things. And the irony there is, though, the two things are they're one and the same person, and that person now has to deal with the idea that he has to hold himself to a higher standard because the rest of the world does, and
I
regardless of whether
think
that's fair to him or not.
that's an
And
interesting
his
way
journey that
in.
he takes, I think, is a great way to get him from point A to point B. And I think Zack Snyder, as a director, did a pretty good job with that.
And
But again, we're
actually,
talking about the past.
I think that's what's I know, and
Yeah.
we'll move on. But I think that's what's missing from a lot of heroes. It's like because he recognizes that people have these expectations of him, that's where he gets that sense of responsibility, and that's why he has to be perfect. There's a conflict there. That's an interesting character, a perfectionist who feels that everybody's counting on him. That's good. We can buy into that. We can relate to that. But let's get off Superman for a little bit and let's take a 10,000-foot view of this thing and see like what is the DCEU going to be? you know. And what they've said
Yeah.
is they don't want to just repeat or compete with Marvel. They want to be something
That's what The Rock
unique.
keeps saying. He's like, we
Yep.
don't have to be Marvel. Like, there's only one Black Adam. He didn't say exactly this, but he said something to the effect that there's only one Black Adam. There's only one Superman. We are us. We are not trying to be Marvel. We're trying to
Yeah.
do the best that we can be, which is basically like, hey, there's no better way of saying that. Like, regardless of whether your intent is that or not, that is the way to go. At least, like you don't want to try to cut because Marvel, at the peak of its prime, I believe, like in my votes, they would call it Phase 2. I think to this day, the best year of the MCU, I think, was 2014 when they had the first Guardians of the Galaxy come out and Captain America: The Winter Soldier come out. I think in terms of overall quality of MCU movies, that year was probably the best year to date. And around that time, Warner Brothers' active strategy was to try to catch up with Marvel as fast as it could, trying to do as much as what the Marvel was doing, which is part of the reason why they fired Zack Snyder or let him go or like really pivot away from his vision, because his vision was really nothing to do with like what Marvel Cinematic Universe was all about. Now today, I think the picture looks very different. And there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter this week where it was an exclusive and they talked about, hey, DC is at a turning point. And it seems like they were sitting on a lot of this information for a while, but now that Black Adam's coming out, Dwayne Johnson's showing up everywhere that he possibly can, from movie theaters to late night shows to premieres. He is like working 24/7 overtime to promote this movie.
Yeah.
They use this as an opportunity to do this huge dump of information where they're talking about how James Gunn is pitching new movies. He's already working on season 2 of Peacemaker. He's got a secret movie that he's working on. Dwayne Johnson has expressed his interest as being like potentially an advisor to the DCEU rather than being like the new Kevin Feige of the DCEU. There's a power vacuum because right now Walter Hamada this week finally, he packed up his office and he officially left the Warner Brothers lot after being with the studio for a long time. Before he was in charge of DC Films, he was at New Line Cinema, and then he became in charge of that. Although he was never truly given like the power to lead on his own. He was always part of a committee, so he was undermined along the way. But hey, he's one of the producers on Black Adam, so you could give him credit for a lot of what they've done in recent years. But he's left, and they haven't found his replacement, that new Kevin Feige that David Zaslav wants for Warner Brothers Discovery to install as the new chief of DC Films and give DC Films its own like umbrella like Marvel Studio does. So in that power vacuum, you've got like Matt Reeves signed a new overall deal with the studio recently, so he's developing his Batman universe of movies, including apparently some solo villain-based movies in addition to the Penguin show on HBO Max, and obviously the trilogy of they're writing Batman 2 now, the Batman 2, I guess, the sequel to the 700 something plus $1 million grossing Batman for Robert Pattinson. And on top of all of that, you still have the movies that have already been produced or in post-production now, with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom coming out next year, The Flash coming out next year, Blue Beetle coming out theatrically, which was originally meant to be on HBO Max next year. They've
What's
also,
what's the
I
latest
think,
with
got
the
Wonder Woman
Flash?
3 in development. So yeah.
Because Ezra Miller, I think they said he could do up to 26 years in jail.
It's potentially, yes, if he gets convicted for that. I think he pleaded non guilty, but obviously that's like the first step to whatever process they have to go through in court. But
Are they
if
recasting him, or they're just gonna make that movie with him, huh? Or
that
they've
movie's
made it?
already done. The movie was,
Oof.
I think the movie was in the can like almost a year ago at this point. They've been in post production, and this summer they did reshoots, which is a normal part of these movies that these days they plan for it before the movie starts
Yeah,
production. So they did reshoots. I think they were as recently as last month doing some pickup shots, and so he's still. I mean, it's too late to recast him for this particular movie,
I
unless they want
know.
to spend a
It
hundred
would.
plus $1 million doing it. But
I
moving
would love.
forward,
I would
I
love a new
don't think they're
Flash.
gonna bring him back. I just don't see that
They'd be
happening.
nuts
There's too
too.
much of a risk.
They'd be nuts too. And also, like, his portrayal changes so many things about the Flash. And the Flash was my favorite superhero growing up. So it's I don't know. Like, I've been disappointed with how the Flash has been treated in most things. The animation treats him pretty well, and it would be cool to see a more classic Flash come back. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I like the blanking on his name, the TV version, the Grant Gustin version of the Flash. I thought that was he was a great Flash, but I don't think you can really translate that to the movies, even though there's probably he may make a cameo because Ezra Miller made a cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover in the Arrowverse on CW, so maybe
Yeah.
they'll just
Well,
to kind
okay,
of
but
even
that's
scales.
another problem with DC is that their animation is completely separate from their live action.
By the way,
Their
did you hear
TV,
Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers are merging? This week it was in the news. They're
they've
merging the two units.
they've been connected for a long time,
Yeah,
but
but they're
they're
still
actually
operationally
merging.
were separate. So they're
Hmm.
probably gonna let go a lot of people who have the same roles, like in teams where there's overlap. But as far as from a creative standpoint, yeah, they're merging into like one thing now, which
Interesting.
there was separation there because I think Warner Brothers animation mostly focused on features. But anyway, the point being, you mentioned like there's in DC they do a lot of live
So,
action and
well,
animation
the thing is,
separately.
the continuities are separate. The TV generally connects to the other TV. Sometimes those actors voice the characters in the animation, but they're playing different versions of the character, or very, very slightly off versions of that character. So it's not as interconnected and interwoven as the MCU, where every property, every like She-Hulk, as bad as it is part of the MCU. It's woven in there with all the same mythology and the same actors playing the same characters. We don't have that consistency with DC, but the fact that they're even touting the name DCEU, you know, or is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Is
DC
that right?
Extended Universe. That's been a term that's
Extended
been around
universe.
for like I think
Yeah.
since that Comic-Con in 2014 almost, when they first announced the sequel to Man of Steel was going to be a Batman v Superman movie.
So
Yeah.
it seems like they're inching toward more interconnectivity, which I think they should because that's part of Marvel's strategy that has worked, and it gets people into the theaters and
Yeah.
more
I mean, they had
engaged
Amanda
because
Waller and Black Adam, which was a connecting. They even had the one of her agents who plays like a key role in Peacemaker, who actually recently her I forget her name. She and James Gunn had been dating for a while, and they finally got married. Um, so there's connections there. Like the two of those
yeah,
characters were directly connected to Peacemaker, were in Black Adam. I've heard that they've also shot some cameos for some of these upcoming movies next year. So there's definitely and much greater effort being put in to connect the dots
yeah,
actively.
I think that's a smart move, but at the same time, like because they don't have a track record of keeping everything canonically consistent, they do have an opportunity now to start and they can recast anybody. It's interesting that they've gone with Cavill again as Superman. Like I said, I'm on board for it. But everything else, you could start over. It'd be okay. Be okay with me.
Hey, I'm a big fan of. Okay, my favorite Batman is Christian Bale's Batman, The Dark Knight from the Dark
Yeah.
Knight trilogy. And having said that, though, I think Ben Affleck's Batman is great. Like the action sequences, especially in Batman v Superman, like the warehouse fight scene, it's probably the best Batman fight scene put to screen. And well, yes, we now have the Robert Pattinson version of Batman out there, and we're gonna have Michael Keaton's version of Batman in Flashpoint in addition to Ben Affleck's. So I don't know where the Batman character is headed ultimately in terms of how they want to treat Ben Affleck's version of the character, who is like the native of the DCEU version of Batman, right? But I like Gal Gadot in the role. I think Jason Momoa is fantastic. He's got such. I mean, the dude is like got charisma, like he drips charisma like sweat. It is he's great in the Aquaman role,
He's
and
good.
I
I
love him
like him a
from all
lot.
the way back in his Stargate Atlantis. That's where Ronan for anyway. I like a lot of the casting choices they've made, especially I mean a lot of these are Zack Snyder era casting choices. I think
Hmm.
Ezra Miller's probably the exception to the rule, and
Yeah.
given what has happened over the course of the last year or 2 years, I highly doubt they're gonna like take a chance on him with another project after this Flash movie comes out. So yeah, they might just simply recast him and we get one of those Don Cheadle as Brody moments where it's like I'm here to deal with it or is moving on. Like like you don't have to do some convoluted like plot thing to like we're
No,
recasting Flash.
no.
Just a
I
new
mean,
actor pops in the
or
next
you could
movie and
just,
he's the Flash.
yeah.
Yeah.
You could make that movie, and we'll see how it does. I mean, I can't imagine it will do fantastically.
Well, I mean, we have to first see like how this first one's gonna do.
That's
A
what I'm
movie,
saying.
by the way, get this. I don't know if you've heard of this statistic, but The Flash, the TV show, debuted the same year that on CW that they announced The Flash, the movie. And The Flash, the movie is gonna come out next summer, right? I think it's a few weeks or maybe a couple of months after The Flash, the TV show, completes its 9 season run on the CW. Meaning
Mhm.
The Flash, the TV show, has gone through 9 seasons, 9 years on TV, and has went from like airing its premiere all the ways to its finale. And it took that long for them to take The Flash, the movie, which had many directors popping in and out, and we didn't know what the movie was going to be for a while. They had multiple scripts, and they trashed them, started again.
Yeah,
But it took them 9 years to bring this to screen. Black Adam had been in development for over a decade, and finally here. So I certainly think one of the things that DCU has to do moving forward as part of this like new 10-year plan, but also as a general like point of like if you want to compete with Marvel on any level, then you need to, I'm not saying become like a factory, like a machine, because I think that implies that you're sacrificing quality for quantity. But the one thing you have to admit that Kevin Feige runs a very tight ship over there at Marvel. Like it's efficient. I mean, they may not get it right every time, and of late they may be off. If you don't like Phase 4, I haven't enjoyed Phase 4 in particular, but
Mhm.
it feels like they're finally getting to the point where quantity is becoming, more of a factor than quality. However, for the majority of the MCU's existence, quality has always been pretty good. And I think DC's record could be better overall. I'm not saying everything has to be a home run out of the park. You can get a couple of RBIs, a couple of, strikes here and there, whatever. You're not going to hit on every ball, but you need to have overall a good batting average. And I think the batting average, to use again a baseball reference and analogy that I'm on, their batting average has simply not been good enough of late, of the last
Mhm.
since the Dark Knight trilogy finished in 2012. I think the last 10 years DC has struck out more than they have, cashed in. And I think they just have to turn the tide a bit more. Although the recent, like the last few years, they've had good amount of success, but they've also had duds like Wonder Woman 1984, which, as much as I wanted to like that movie, it had a lot of problems. So I do think that, with Black Adam, again, it's not getting great critics reception, but if it makes money at the box office, that's all they're going to care about. Like the money
Yeah.
talks. That's really what's going to determine whether it's going to get a sequel. And it looks like if Dwayne Johnson's going to have his way, he's already been teasing Black Adam versus Superman. That post-credit scene might have given us a preview
Yeah.
of it, or I mean, I don't know if maybe they're gonna have a nice conversation, and then The Rock's gonna be like, "I'm not a hero, but I do kill people," and then like Superman's like, "Well, that's not cool. Let's fight," or like, or maybe Black Adam's like,
Yeah.
"All right, well, I'll
Watching
kill
that
you
scene
now,"
though, I
and
gotta
whatever. I
say,
don't know.
I didn't get the impression that
Yeah,
like it was gonna turn into a big fight. He
maybe it
comes out
doesn't
of the
start
shadows
that
and it's
way,
like it
But there's
seems
there's
it
an
just seems like a good
ideological
talk.
conflict I think that pits them against each other naturally, because you hinted like the Superman, this Henry Cavill Superman, for him to work in a conflict with Black Adam, he has to be that Superman who's like, no matter what, I'm gonna do the right thing.
Yeah.
And Black Adam has to be like, well, if you're gonna hurt the people I care about, or do something like do wrong by me, I will kill you. Like, he's willing to cross that line with far less remorse, and where Superman is like much more, he's like, I draw the line at killing people. So, or I mean, I know he killed Zod, but it was forced. People don't come at me. Like seriously, I actually thought it was a fantastic choice from a writing standpoint for the Man of Steel. But since then, Zack Snyder's every version of, I mean, regardless of whether it's Zack Snyder directing or whoever else, Henry Cavill Superman on screen since that moment with Zod, he has gone out of his way to like make sure that he saves people's lives rather than like having to kill somebody, even when the person might deserve it. Whereas Black Adam, he does not have a whole lot of reservations about killing people if he feels like they deserve it. So I think that could be the core of the conflict between the two characters.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the two guys could grab a beer and just talk it out, but wouldn't make for a
That would be
really
fun.
interesting movie.
That would
I'd
be
watch
fun.
it. I'd watch
Yeah.
it. 30-minute conversation, dude. We'll do a My Dinner with Andre type movie where it's Superman and Black Adam at dinner, just drinking wine, talking philosophically about what the ethical responsibilities are of Superman. I'd watch it.
Yeah,
Hell,
maybe
I'd
that's how it
direct it.
starts. The Justice League, Batman, or sorry, Bruce Wayne has invited the Justice Society to dinner with the Justice League at the Wayne Manor, and I guess things don't go as well as they hoped, and it becomes a whole.
I
Maybe
mean,
maybe
that's the
they'll
other
call
thing.
it Justice Civil War. I don't know. I'm starting to mash things up that I
Do
probably
we
shouldn't
do
be.
we ever? I did not sit through all of Justice League. Did we get into the headquarters?
They don't really have headquarters. I think they were so at the end of the movie. There's this like in one of the closing scenes, uh, they have like because Wayne Manor and the DCEU is this huge Parthenon-like structure, but that at one point was burned down. So you only have like the basic structure over there, all the walls and windows blown out. So Batman kind of walks in and he's like, a big long table and like, seven seats. But then Wonder Woman walks in behind him and Gal Gadot is like, or Diana Prince is like, but room for more. And like Alfred is right there, like taking notes or like listening in because he's probably gonna do the work. So they hinted at like what could be like what do they call it, the Hall of Justice in the
Yeah,
comics,
I think
not
so.
like the floating tower in the animated Justice, which I was like, hey, I want to get to that eventually. I'd love to see that happen.
Yeah,
Um, but and then in this movie in Black Adam, we saw that they have this Professor Xavier-esque big, you know, I don't even know if you want to call it mansion. It's practically like the
compound.
the Versailles.
Yeah,
Like if you were to go to Palace of Versailles in France, it's that. It's like a palace that Hawkman lives in, which
yeah.
is it seems like that doubles for the JSA's headquarters too. So
Yeah, it may.
yeah,
It may, but in any case, it'll be interesting to see. It would be interesting to see them have a conversation. To do a superhero movie that isn't a superhero movie with everybody in costume would be hilarious, but I don't know how many people would watch it.
by the
Um,
way, before we
yeah.
finish up, I just want to. This is one other thing from this article, and I just want to get your quick thoughts on this. So
Okay.
I hinted at this earlier in the show, that Henry Cavill isn't coming back for just like this one cameo appearance. He's coming back to do a lot more than that. And in this Hollywood Reporter article that we've been quoting, um, they mentioned that Superman as well as Henry Cavill, while they were not in the initial plans for Black Adam, because as The Rock said in his press tour, that the old regime that just were done with Henry Cavill's version of the character. Once the new regime came in, David Zaslav and co, they were like, yeah, sure, go do it. And that's why they shot a cameo like as
Hmm.
late as I think it was around Labor Day that they mentioned. But the point being, he's not just back for one cameo. Apparently, there's a new solo Henry Cavill like Superman movie, a sequel, what would be a proper sequel to Man of Steel in development, and they've attached like the same producer who produced like the original Man of Steel. He helped produce the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm forgetting his name. He's like the biggest in-house producer on the Warner Brothers lot, and he's basically been part of DC movies for a very long time, and he's already attached to this new Superman movie. I'm gonna find his name eventually. Oh, actually no, that's Michael DeLuca. Charles Rowan, that's the name. He's right here. So Man of Steel 2 is being produced by Charles Rowan. Charles Rowan is like I mentioned, a prolific producer who, outside of Kevin Feige, I think has probably the best record with superhero movies in Hollywood. Even although he's done most of his work with DC, whereas Kevin Feige did most of his with Marvel, or has done and is doing with Marvel. So they're looking for writers. They have a producer attached. Henry Cavill is clearly back. He must have signed some sort of a contract already, otherwise he wouldn't be in that role. So I'm excited that this is a lot further along than people maybe thought it was. That we will see how this cameo goes, and we'll think about it. No, this movie is happening, or at least is a lot further along than it has any business being, or at least in most people's minds. What do you think about the idea that yeah, we're finally gonna get a Man of Steel 2?
Well, first of all, that's the right guy to bring on. Anybody who touched the Dark Knight trilogy, I would trust them with this. And like I said before, Man of Steel, they made some interesting choices with it. Some stuff I didn't agree with, but largely I do like the movie. Um, I would like to see this. I'm ready for some new Superman content, period. I think the grounded treatment of Man of Steel, of The Dark Knight, that doesn't get old. And honestly, it was a great cast in that movie. They all did a good job playing the characters, making the reality feel real. And yeah, I'm surprised it's taken this long to even announce a sequel. Like, let's do it. Let's see it. I'm excited for it.
Well, I mean, for a long time they were just done with. They were developing like these three other Superman movies with other versions of the character than what Henry Cavill portrayed. So I think that was part of the reason. But I'm so glad. I don't know if those projects are still ongoing, but we do know this Man of Steel 2 project is now up and running, which I could not be happier. I literally had an ear-to-ear grin watching Henry Cavill come back in that Black Adam post-credit sequence. Ah, yeah, I can't
It's a
wait.
great character. He's a good actor, and with the right team, they could really make that an event and something that people are like. That could be a great movie.
Yeah, and
I'll
there's a
just
lot
say
more
right
people
now.
who have, I think, changed their opinions. And I mean, there's still a lot of people who haven't, but like a lot of people have changed their minds about how they feel about Henry Cavill Superman over time. So I think that movie has better potential today than it maybe did even a few years ago. So it makes even more business sense today than it
Yeah.
beyond just like the story or whether you prefer his interpretation of the character or not. Hey,
No,
I'll
they are all the pieces are there
yeah.
for them to succeed. Direct it well, write it
Yes,
well.
absolutely. And they're looking for a director and a writer. I wouldn't mind if Zack Snyder came back. I don't know if they're going to go in that direction. I personally wouldn't mind. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would, and a lot of people out there who would love to see him back. But we'll see. By the way, just a quick nugget, and you don't even have to answer this. I just want to put it out in the world because, since we're good vibes in the DC extended universe, the DCEU, I would love to hear some news coming out in the next few weeks that Ben Affleck is decided he's back as Batman full time, and we're gonna get that Batman and Deathstroke movie with Joe Manganiello playing Deathstroke. There have been like rumors on social media and apparently like scoopers saying that Ben Affleck's been on the Warner Brothers lot a lot recently, signing all sorts of new contracts for appearances and whatnot. So. Uh, I don't know. I think it would be great to see Ben Affleck's Batman and Henry Cavill Superman on screen again and more stuff together or apart. I really love both of those characters' interpretations. So
Uh, I could take it or leave it. I don't know. And any people like Batman no matter who's playing him. I'll just say that. Everybody likes Batman. He'll be back. We know. We know he'll be
yes,
back. Tell us who your fan casting ideas are, what you think is the future of the DCEU. If you think we brought up any interesting points, if you think I'm an idiot, happy to hear you out on that. And, just be part of the conversation because it goes on and on and on. Like and subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Thank you for watching. This has been an episode of Oh So Curious.